It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Crop collapse, fisheries collapse, unfolding ozone layer collapse, global rain cycle collapse, record droughts, record firestorms, record deluges, all taking place under commonly filthy white skies with frequent grid patterns. Nothing to see here, we're told by the controllers and their matrix media mouthpieces. All just conspiracy theories, they say. From science.org, Geoengineering in the sky with diamonds. That's the actual headline, again, from science.org. They continue. Geoengineering is controversial at best and risky at worst. One of the most researched proposals, they say, is stratospheric aerosol injection, which involves lofting millions of tons of aerosols into the atmosphere to reflect some of the sun's radiation and cool the planet. Now, they say, research published last week suggests a shiny new aerosol might work best. Diamond dust. Follow me through with this. It's beyond absurd. Does anyone actually buy into such utter and total nonsense from the so-called climate science community? More from science.org. Typically, solar geoengineering involves sulfur, which has plenty of precedent. Volcanic eruptions have historically volleyed enough sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere to cool the planet by as much as half a degree C. That was 1992, Mount Pinatubo. But sulfur, they say, poses numerous problems. Imagine that. Including causing acid rain, depleting the ozone layer, and leading to stratospheric warming, which can disrupt atmospheric circulation and climate patterns down to Earth's surface. And of course, no mention of the climate engineering elements that have been showing up in rain samples for decades: aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, surfactants, polymer fibers, graphene, and more. The atmosphere is a physics lab and a war zone. They can, because no one's willing to look up from their handheld appendage electronic device to find out what's going on. This must change soon. We're running out of time. And about all the consequences that we're officially told could, may, might happen, no. The correct phrase would be is happening. More from science.org. A team of researchers tested 7 aerosols, including sulfur dioxide and particles of aluminum, calcite, and diamond, in a 3D climate model that incorporated their chemistry, transport, microphysics, and heat trapping and reflecting abilities. Of the options, diamond dust was the best at cooling the planet while also avoiding stratospheric warming. Sulfur was the second worst. There's more on this latest load of total idiocy from the so-called climate science community that has also suggested placing reflective tarps over the entire North and South poles, putting Brazil-sized balloons into space. They really proposed this. I'm not making this up. Building 10 million wind-powered water pumps in the Arctic to pump cold seafloor water to the surface to try and cool things down. What would be the result of that? Warm water infiltrating the seafloor region, thawing massive methane deposits there. Massive methane release that migrates into the atmosphere. Game over on planet Earth. What a great idea from the so-called climate scientists. And I'm only giving a few examples here. There are many more. Here's more on the diamond dust yarn of total nonsense. From Futurism.com, scientists propose shooting $200 trillion worth of pulverized diamonds into atmosphere. Then they say, quote, it's surprisingly promising. Really. The report continues, we're staring down the barrel of near certain climate doom. That part's true, but no mention of the actual ongoing weather warfare operations. Futurism.com continues with this. There are ways of cooling the planet, spending decades grinding up something approaching $1 quadrillion worth of diamonds into dust and then dispersing the powdered gemstones into our atmosphere. Futurism.com then asks, how would this hypothetical approach work? Question mark. They say, as detailed in a study published in the Journal of Geophysical Research Letters, injecting about 5 million tons of diamond dust into the atmosphere each year would be enough to cool the planet. This feat of solar geoengineering via the deliberate release of small particles in the atmosphere is known as stratospheric aerosol injection. Really, like those jets we see almost daily doing exactly that? Except what's showing up in our rain test are aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, polymer fibers, surfactants, graphene, and more. Connect the dots. They say sulfur remains an attractive and probably our best option because they say it's basically free. Who said that? Douglas McMartin, the article states, an engineer at Cornell University whose work was cited in the study. Douglas McMartin told Science, "We can readily examine its effects on a large scale through volcanic eruptions, and because it's a gas, it would be easier," McMartin says, "to disperse through aircraft than with heavy payloads of diamonds." McMartin also told the journal, "I do think that it's interesting to explore these other materials, but if you ask me today what's going to be deployed, it's going to be sulfate." Yes, Dr. Douglas McMartin from Cornell University, who first neglects to mention that based on the most recent science studies, the cooling from volcanic eruptions is only temporary and toxic, followed by an even worse overall warming of the planet. Thus, the entire foundational premise for climate engineering, aka solar radiation management operations, is completely and totally flawed. For the record, Dr. Douglas McMartin is the scientist that was solely responsible for triggering Facebook's draconian censorship of the groundbreaking Geoengineering Watch documentary, proving that climate engineering is a reality. Documentary titled The Dimming, now with over 25 million views on YouTube in spite of the censorship, again, triggered by Dr. Douglas McMartin. Also for the record, Geoengineeringwatch.org sued Douglas McMartin in the attempt to hold him personally accountable for triggering the censorship of The Dimming. This legal action was a six-figure plus expense for Geoengineeringwatch.org, but worth the effort. Our legal action was covered by major media sources, including Bloomberg News. Our lawsuit sent a message to those in the science community that to participate in the systematic cover-up of the climate engineering operations is not okay. Geoengineeringwatch.org will continue to do everything in our power to hold them, the so-called climate science community, legally and morally accountable for trying to prevent the public from having access to extremely dire information that they, the public, have absolutely every right to know. Geoengineeringwatch.org is the only source we know of that has ever actually filed and followed through with legal action in the U.S. in the attempt to hold the so-called climate science community accountable. Other sources may claim that they might take legal action someday, but as of yet, we've only seen them rattling their tin cups to collect as many donations as they can without actually filing anything, even at times hijacking Geoengineeringwatch.org images to give the appearance that we are them, which we are not. Please exercise caution. Geoengineering Watch will never behave or solicit in this way, ever. So, was Douglas McMartin a, quote, independent fact-checker as the Facebook so-called fact-checking entity claims? Absolutely not. McMartin had a years-long record of antagonistic communications with myself after McMartin and I debated on a live New York radio station, WBAI. And how did that debate go for Doug? Search and view geoengineeringwatch.org debating the geoengineering reality Dane Wigington and Caltech scientist Douglas McMartin. Decide for yourself how McMartin fared in this live debate, and if he was honest or anything but. About the climate engineering nanoparticle fallout and the air we breathe. From theconversation.com, tiny airborne particles within air pollution could be a silent killer. No could, may, might. Is. The report says high levels of ultrafine particles in the atmosphere over long periods of time are significantly associated with increased non-accidental deaths, particularly from cardiovascular and respiratory diseases. They continue, ultrafine particles are aerosols less than 0.1 micrometers or 100 nanometers in diameter, about 1/1000th the width of a human hair. Due to their tiny size, the report states, they can easily be inhaled into the distal branches of lungs, quickly absorbed into the bloodstream, and even pass through organ barriers. There's more. Ultrafine particles are typically much greater in number and have a much larger surface area to volume ratio. And that's exactly why the climate engineers use nanoparticles. That exact reason. That's why there's so many in our skies. They then say allowing them to carry substantial amounts of hazardous metals and organic compounds. Furthermore, the report states, because of their smaller size, ultrafine particles can follow the airflow and get deep into lungs when inhaled. These unique characteristics make ultrafine particles particularly dangerous, leading to a range of adverse health problems. For the record, no life form is spared from the consequences of climate engineering fallout. From the largest life forms to the smallest, all are slowly succumbing to countless forms of damage, decimation, and contamination. And on the contamination front, for those who don't know, bioavailable aluminum is toxic to all life forms, period, no exceptions, and it is a primary element named in climate engineering patents. It's essential to understand that this nanoparticle contamination of heavy metals and polymers is ubiquitous all over the planet. There is absolutely no place to hide tens of millions of tons annually from climate engineering fallout alone. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, the end of the world as we know it broadcast, brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Reaching a critical mass, as I state every week, this is the only way forward in this fight. We can and we absolutely must reach this critical mass by starting a conversation on climate engineering that leads people to a credible source of data. Geoengineeringwatch.org will continue all of our efforts to be the go-to source on covert climate engineering operations. A conversation on climate engineering can be easily started with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials available on our homepage. Our only goal is to bring this issue to light and to a halt. Please help us to sound the alarm. From the UK Guardian, James Lovelock, he's an internationally renowned climate scientist, states, "Enjoy life while you can. In 20 years, global warming will hit the fan." Pause. This is a 16-year-old article. Where does that put us now? And again, whatever you want to think is causing the planet to warm, even if you think it's an elderly man in a cloud somewhere with a thermostat, the planet's in meltdown, period. And there can be no legitimate discussion about climate anything from any perspective without first and foremost addressing the climate engineering issue, which is the greatest single assault ever launched upon creation by the human race. Lovelock never mentioned climate engineering, of course, which is, again, the single most environmentally destructive human activity of all. And that's saying a lot, as the human race, taken as a whole, has been horrific stewards of planet Earth. If you're willing to face even more dire data, search geoengineeringwatch.org. Why are they spraying? Answers from an insider. Search that exact title. This is an extremely important interview. The insider was found suicided shortly after the exchange, and there is a significant amount of technical data in this exchange, data only an insider could possibly know. The interview was conducted in 2003. The scientist insider indicated that we had a maximum of 20 years before climate collapse. We are now at 21 years. Collapse is underway, with climate engineering operations further fueling the process, not mitigating it, but by no means, again, the only factor. Please remember this. It's not a this or that equation. It's an all the above. Every form of human activity that affects the energy balance and the life support systems of the planet is a part of the problem. Keep that in mind. But if we can stop the intentional intervention, we can focus on the rest. Please forgive me as I blaze through as many breaking reports as I can in this broadcast. I'm painting with a broad brush. Take notes on the headlines and search them to learn more. We are rapidly running out of time. I'm desperately trying to disseminate all the data I can while I can. Moving on. From the irisstar.com, scientists warn of, quote, societal collapse on Earth with worsening climate situation. A new study has found that much of the world will face uninhabitable temperatures if we continue on the current course of climate change as the situation grows more dire. Again, no mention of climate engineering. No surprise. It's not allowed. Uninhabitable so-called wet bulb temperatures are already occurring in some parts of the Middle East and elsewhere. This summer, heat indexes, aka feels-like temperatures, as high as 160 degrees or more. We're in a runaway climate collapse scenario now. Our only hope of buying time is to halt the ongoing destruction on many fronts, but starting with stopping weather warfare. About the primary perpetrators, from theintercept.com, when blood money isn't enough, Raytheon admits to defrauding Pentagon. This is business as usual for the military-industrial complex, for those that don't realize it. There's the darkest form of disaster capitalism of all. And for the record, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin are neck-deep in climate engineering everything. Do we hear anything about any of this on Matrix Media? No. Just non-stop, scripted, political theater as Rome burns. From thefinancialtimes.com, Carbon Credit Standards body defends policies after its former director is charged with fraud. About carbon credits, by itself, that's a complete fraud. Pretending to protect forests that are already dying by the day, climate engineering being core to that equation, and not sequestering any carbon at this point, as I covered in last week's broadcast. Carbon is not being sequestered by forests. They're becoming a carbon source, not a carbon sink, because they're dying. But nevertheless, the carbon sequestration plan continues and is used as an excuse to allow the carbon fuel carnival to continue unabated. So much smoke and mirrors. Speaking of which, new from The Guardian, COP29 host Azerbaijan, set for major carbon fuel expansion report, says no conflict of interest here. Big oil countries, just like COP28 in Dubai, and big oil executives hosting global climate conferences, where behind closed doors, countries are leveraged to actively or passively participate in the climate engineering weather warfare onslaught, the consequences of which are unfolding and accelerating by the day. On that note from USA Today, endless summer. Why is it still so hot? Question mark. They ask, hot enough for you? Question mark. Unusual summer-like warmth is hanging on across much of the U.S., forecasters said, and no real cold is in sight in the forecast. The USA Today report then states, according to the National Weather Service, a quiet and relatively uneventful fall weather pattern will be in place across the continental U.S. October, they say, is shaping up to be one of the warmest, driest Octobers on record. I can say firsthand that living in a formerly lush forest in Northern California is now like living in hell. Matrix Media has recently sounded the alarm about the northeastern states being rainless for 3 weeks. My wilderness location on the east side of Lake Shasta has been rainless for 6 months, with the exception of 2 passing drizzles, with climate engineering operations bombarding the clouds that passed over with chemical ice nucleation seeding, creating a strange cold mist with odd odors, a day of chemical cold followed by more 100 plus degree days well into October. And when the sun goes down, so often the temperatures don't, because that heat is being trapped. And there are many factors contributing to this. Again, all forms of human activity that alter the energy balance of the planet are a part of the problem. This includes the burning of 100 million barrels of carbon fuel a day, 26 million tons of coal a day, and the dispersion of light-blocking, heat-trapping particles into the atmosphere that are part of climate engineering, and the frequency transmissions that are used as part of climate engineering in the case of high-pressure heat domes, that we hear that term all the time now. These weapons of mass destruction, like HAARP in Alaska, can transmit millions of watts of power into the electrically charged ionosphere, causing an electrical chain reaction, heating the atmosphere to tremendous temperatures, causing it to expand up and down, and below that downward push is a high-pressure heat dome. This is used to help steer the jet stream, but underneath that heat dome, the air is typically stagnant. Nights don't cool off because the heat can't rise and escape. We have these conditions now happening all over. Pay attention, connect the dots. From Fox News, wildfire fears continue in Northeast as bone-dry conditions persist. Again, the weather makers control the spigot. Don't forget that. Record drought, record deluge scenarios, both are the hallmarks of climate engineering operations. And in Northern California, again, not 3 weeks without rain, 6 months with scaldingly hot temperatures and almost no humidity. Is it any wonder the forests are burning to the ground? And then we have the so-called experts blaming it on the beetles or that we're not cutting down enough trees. That has nothing to do with why these forests are incinerating. And I know about forest thinning. I've done that on an industrial scale. 3 state programs, 3 federal programs. I ran them all on this preserve. My father was an arborist. I do know about forests and trees. It's essential not to blindly accept the official narrative on anything from any so-called experts in any arena. How much have we been lied to in other arenas of so-called expertise in recent years that now people are finally waking up to? Please, please clear the lens through which you see the world, and you will see a very different view of the horizon. Speaking of deluge, from CBC Canada, cholera cases explode after extreme rains fueled by climate change, they say, in West and Central Africa. New study says climate change intensified floods that killed more than 1,000. Again, there can be no discussion about climate anything, no legitimate discussion, without first and foremost addressing the climate engineering elephant in the equation that is completely derailing the hydrological cycle all over the planet. Please search the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Learn more. About other recent deluges from The Guardian, Florida reports deaths from rare flesh-eating bacteria after hurricanes. Florida seems like an increasingly desirable place to visit, doesn't it? Water temperatures last year of 102 degrees, killing reefs, fish, everything else. Hydrogen sulfide releasing sargassum seaweed washing up on beaches everywhere, dead fish over beaches everywhere, flesh-eating bacteria, cyclones. But the rest of the country, and for that matter, the rest of the world, is enduring much of the same on various levels and in various forms. Does anyone rationally believe that our government or other governments around the world would ask for our permission before deploying climate engineering operations? Really? Did they ask for our permission before detonating 2,400 nuclear bombs, which also contaminated everything everywhere? Weather warfare is the crown jewel covert weapon of the controllers. They will never give it up willingly. Keep that in mind. What happens when larger links in the chain of our current reality break? Links in the chain of the planet's remaining life support systems. Another from the UK Guardian. We don't know where the tipping point is. Climate expert on potential collapse of Atlantic circulation. Follow me through with this because I want to dispel a major misconception. They say the dangers of collapse of the main Atlantic Ocean circulation, known as the AMOC, have been greatly underestimated and would have devastating and irreversible impacts, according to an open letter released at this weekend by 44 experts from 15 countries. That part's true. The AMOC ocean current is one of our planet's largest heat transport systems, moving the equivalent of 50 times the human energy use, and it has a particularly strong impact on the climate in Europe. Affects the ocean's CO2 uptake and oxygen supply, as well as rainfall patterns. Again, zero mention of the climate engineering elephant in the equation, which alters upper-level wind currents and thus also impacts ocean currents. But what about this report from automagazine.com? Climate doomsday, Gulf Stream on verge of collapse, triggering a new ice age, experts warn. Have they really warned that? Let's continue. The new ice age part of this report is total disinformation propaganda intended to further fuel confusion and division in the population. Ocean currents distribute heat. They don't eliminate it. And if and when the Gulf Stream shuts down, any cooling in some regions would be completely offset by additional heating in other regions. The Hollywood Day After Tomorrow movie scenario is total fiction with public programming in mind. More covert marketing of climate engineering from the UK Guardian by Rebecca Solnit, S-O-L-N-I-T, who says, is it worse to have no climate solutions or to have them but refuse to use them? ? She continues, we are on the brink of an irreversible climate disaster. This is a global emergency beyond any doubt. Much of the very fabric of life on Earth is imperiled. We are stepping into a critical and unpredictable new phase of the climate crisis. We have the solutions, the Guardian report states, and we have had them for a while, and they keep getting better, as in better designed, more efficient, more affordable, and adaptable. We just need to implement them, the Guardian report states. Amazing new technology to solve our problems, be it geoengineering, they say, carbon sequestration, or fusion. Let's clarify the claims of Guardian author Rebecca Solnit, S-O-L-N-I-T. Carbon sequestration is a fraud. Nuclear fusion is a far-off fantasy. And geoengineering is an ongoing catastrophe. So where does that leave us? Perhaps Rebecca Solnit would benefit by being sent a link to the Geoengineering Watch documentary, The Dimming. Please always be peaceful and professional when sending out credible data to those who absolutely need to see it. More from the UK Guardian. Meteorologists could be climate change heroes, the report says, by relaying its urgency to the public. And that's by Katrina Vanden Heuvel, H-E-U-V-L. The report says weathercasters are positioned to help viewers connect short-term extreme events like hurricanes with the climate crisis. They say this: such an unlikely hero went viral earlier this month when John Morales, a venerable meteorologist in Miami, became visibly emotional on air during one of his reports on Hurricane Milton. His voice choking, he offered an ominous assessment of the hurricane's strength. "This is just horrific," Morales said, and that sincerity and urgency garnered the clip nearly 2 million views. The resonance of Morales' appearance proves that combining deep expertise, hard-earned credibility, and a willingness to be vulnerable could provide, they say, a roadmap or a forecast for climate reporting to remain relevant and impactful despite the headwinds. Let's stop there. Wow. That yarn from author Katrina Vanden Heuvel should, I would think, justifiably anger any that are fully awake and aware of the climate engineering operations that are taking place in our skies. If meteorologist John Morales had a shred of honor or courage, he would have addressed the ongoing climate engineering onslaught live on the air. Whatever emotions he displayed, while completely omitting any mention of the climate engineering atrocities, is either acting or ignorance of the very field of study in which we are told he is an expert. The climate science community cover-up of climate engineering is criminal, period, as is the Matrix Media's cover-up of the same. The report then states, global heating does have short-term consequences. Let's stop there. There's no short-term consequence about a planet that turns into a superheated, lifeless ball of rock, which climate engineering is helping to further fuel. And those that doubt this can happen, those that think that the planet has some magic temperature adjustment mechanism on it that no matter what we do to it, it will always maintain an equilibrium, good luck with that. We're in a runaway collapse scenario right now. Countless causes, but climate engineering at the top of the list. Final excerpt from the Guardian report. Republicans and Democrats alike rank the Weather Channel as their most trusted news source, and meteorologists remain among the most trusted sources regarding global heating. Really? Most trusted? The Weather Channel climate engineering cover-up actors, and the same with the so-called meteorological community? Question, again, how will populations react once they become fully aware of the degree of deception that has been perpetrated on them by so many so-called experts? We'll soon enough find out. The climate engineering mass awakening is well underway. Katrina Vanden Heuvel, again the author of the report just covered, is also editor and publisher of The Nation, and she is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Imagine that. The Council of Foreign Relations. What a surprise. On that note, from AP News, Russia amplified hurricane disinformation to drive Americans apart, researchers find. No, because our government would never do anything like that, would they? They would never try to fuel the most socially divisive, outrageous everything to drive as many wedges into populations as they possibly can. Our government would never do that, right? Think again. They say theories about weather manipulation, this is from the AP News report, undermine public trust in government as we near Election Day, which could seriously impact voter confidence. Really? AP News expects us to gulp down the same old "it's the Russians" narrative? No, it's Americans that are finally waking up to the fact that climate engineering operations are shockingly visible in our skies, wreaking havoc, and the controllers will do everything they can in their power to deny the issue till the brutal, bitter end. And no, it isn't the left-right issue. That's another illusion designed to drive more wedges into an already deeply fractured society. Back to what we're breathing. What's it doing to the bees and the rest of the insects and all life, for that matter? From Earth.com, bees are the latest victims of plastic pollution. Nano and microplastic particles, NMPs, are increasingly contaminating both urban and rural landscapes, bringing bees and other beneficial insects into contact with them. If insects ingest these plastic particles, think polymer nanoparticles, part of the climate engineering mix for those who don't know, from food or the air, it can damage their organs and alter their behavior, hindering their ability to perform essential ecosystem services like pollination and pest control. Plastic pollution, the report says, thus poses considerable risks to biodiversity, agricultural production, and global food security. The study established that bees' ingestion of plastic leads to damage to their digestive systems, weakening of their immune systems, and changes in their behavior. Does anyone remember on this broadcast multiple times I've covered the plastic nanoparticles that are now collecting in extremely significant quantities in human brains, along with every other organ? How about that? Question, does anyone doubt that this form of pollution is having, again, exactly the same impact on all of us? Why wouldn't it? Of course it is. For the record, climate engineering fallout mathematically is the greatest single source of atmospheric nanoparticle pollution, with the occasional exception of firestorm smoke canopies, which we see climate engineering operations taking place above those canopies as well. That can only be something malevolent. And even this, the smoke canopies, can be linked directly to climate engineering due to these operations impacting the rain cycle, contaminating soils and root systems, and destroying the ozone layer. Please search the Engineering Wildfires section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. One of our most important reports is titled Wildfires Serve Geoengineering Agenda. Please search that somewhere besides Google, because they do their best to hide anything and everything from geoengineeringwatch.org. Help us share articles like that anywhere and everywhere you can. About our food from the Anchorage, Alaska Daily News. Wondering where the fish have gone? Question mark. Report says, with a bleak salmon return this year in northwest Alaska, a lifelong fisherman reflects on a season marked by empty nets and big questions. Here's the short answer to the big questions this report refers to. The lack of fish is because they're dead, just like the so-called mystery of the 10 billion missing snow crabs in the waters off Alaska, also dead. Superheating, deoxygenating, stratifying seas, dead zones, well over 500 of them that are known, and all of them rapidly expanding and combining. The entire planetary ocean will soon be a dead zone known as Canfield Ocean. Look that one up. This is the near-term destination on the current trajectory. Oceans die, we die. Simple. From Newsweek, drought prompts nationwide low water level warnings. Nationwide. Think about that. Groundwater is continuing to decline with the lack of rain causing pumping capacity to be cut back. Again, drought, deluge scenarios, the hallmark of climate engineering operations, and they are lying profusely about how bad the droughts actually are. It is the driest ever in Northern California. I don't care what's in the reservoirs like Lake Shasta. That is not indicative of soil moisture or fuel moisture. Driest ever. Ponds lowest ever. Bottom line, and they show us under the minimum designation of drought, and it's the worst ever. What's wrong with this picture? They are lying about absolutely everything at this point to try to pacify populations till the brutal bitter end, to try to feed normalcy bias, pumping up the stock market ridiculously, because if they didn't, everything would already be insolvent. And there is no economy on a dead planet, for those that don't know that yet. Here's more examples of destroying Earth's last remaining life support systems in the name of capitalism. From mongabay.com, revealed biomass firm poised to clear-cut Bornean rainforest for dubious, quote, green energy. Green energy? Really? Cutting down rainforests to make wood pellets. Yes, just another chapter from the planetary asylum, much like cutting down rainforests to grow cows. Bad idea. There's more from AP News. Miners are destroying forests to meet surging demand for metals and minerals, report says. Doesn't make that EV so environmentally friendly, does it? The report says, whether it's digging for metals and minerals for cell phones or electric vehicles, or coal for power generation, mining around the world has skyrocketed since 2000, causing widespread destruction of tropical forests, degrading the environment, and displacing indigenous and local communities. The World Resources Institute says in a report released Wednesday of this week. Those figures are likely conservative since they do not include indirect tree loss from mining-related infrastructure like access roads, storage facilities, and other installations, says the report by the World Resources Institute. Where industrial-scale extraction happens around the world right now, it comes with significant harm to the environment and to the communities that rely on it. Wow. Who would have thought destroying our environment came with consequences? It's a good thing we have teams of scientists to tell us that. And about the coming scheduled weather, also from Newsweek, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration map reveals U.S. set for unusually warm winter. What a newsflash that is. The planet is in total meltdown. We're somewhere in the range of 600 months in a row of above historical average temperatures, about 50 years worth. The meltdown has gone exponential in the last 18 months, both on land and over our seas. Again, with climate engineering fueling the overall fire. Short-term toxic surface cooldowns with chemical ice nucleation, cloud seeding operations, think big hail and extreme temperature whiplash scenarios. Not nature. Climate intervention operations. Buckle up. We're in for a ride. Count on it. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 481, October 26, 2024. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News is brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations, known as geoengineering. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour broadcast can be found on the homepage of Geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. I want to express my deepest gratitude, as always, to those that are marching forward in this desperate last-hour fight for all that matters. It's our collective efforts that can yet make a difference. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities. Best way to share: by circulating the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. People like Dr. Douglas McMartin mentioned earlier in this broadcast. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment. All of this helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience. How do we reach those that still aren't looking up? Starting a conversation is essential. Geoengineering Watch awareness raising materials can help to do that. They can be found on our homepage. Our only goal: to provide activists what they need to move this fight forward. Extremely high quality printed materials, shocking images, full color, a picture is worth 1,000 words. We pass these printed materials on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. We put a huge amount of effort into this only for the sake of the cause. We now have new Geoengineering Watch hoodies, Geoengineering Watch shirts, photos of both on our homepage. We have scannable business cards, bumper stickers, all effective tools to help strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue. Again, reaching a critical mass, the only way forward. If we can expose it, we have a chance of stopping it from the inside out. Our military brothers and sisters and their families need to know what they're participating in, because right now they're being lied to. They're being told they're participating in some sort of planetary saving endeavor, which could not be further from the truth. If you're willing to share a picture of yourself with a Geoengineering Watch t-shirt or hoodie, ideally in some crowded location, please send your photo to us so that we can post it as part of our activist compilation, which is now part of our materials page. The images encourage others to make their voices heard in this desperate last-hour effort to sound the alarm. Again, to all those that are steadfastly committed to exposing and halting the climate engineering insanity, whatever your circumstances or situation is, you're trying, you're doing your best. You have my deepest gratitude now and forever. Moving on. From Euronews.com, Italy and France hit by severe flooding after heavy rain. Really? That's what caused the flooding, heavy rain? I would have never guessed that. What about the question of climate engineering in this equation and its connection to that heavy rain and the steering of that rain to wherever it went? You won't hear a word about that. It isn't allowed. On that note, from the Council on Strategic Risks.org, listen to this: geoengineering and climate change in an age of disinformation and strategic competition. There's a very dire message here. Please follow me through again. Geoengineering, sometimes called climate intervention, is gaining more attention as a potential tool to manage the impacts of climate change. How's that going so far after 75 plus years of it? The Council on Strategic Risks study continues. A steady drumbeat of reports from governments and scientific institutions argue for developing research programs to allow for better informed decisions on the risks and benefits, of which there are none, of geoengineering. At the same time, they say the national security community is raising concerns, emphasizing the risk of large-scale, successful unilateral deployment by a middle or rogue power. Now, our government would never do that, would they, without a global consensus and permission? However, the report says, The more acute near-term security risks associated with geoengineering have little to do with the ultimate effect of such interventions, but instead with the perceptions of such interventions, particularly, they say, in a world shaped by geopolitical competition and growing divides. Oh, so that's all it is. The now constant weather cataclysms are just a perception problem for the power structure. What a relief that must be to all those that are actually being decimated by freak unnatural weather catastrophes. The Council on Strategic Risks report then says this: expanding geoengineering efforts may exacerbate the growth of harmful conspiracy theories and influence campaigns that further undermine trust in government and science. Such issues have gotten comparably little attention in the national security discourse. That last excerpt from this report should alarm anyone that's even slightly awake, that anyone who dares to question what's taking place in our skies may soon be considered a national security risk. Yes, the public is waking up, and the predator-parasite class is more desperate and dangerous than ever before. Never forget, the controllers couldn't do what they do without the active or passive support of the majority population. When will that change? As the proverb goes, we have seen the enemy, and he is us. Moving on, it seems every major science and media source is discussing geoengineering, but if a member of the public makes mention of the climate engineering elephant in the sky, they're instantly and aggressively marginalized. First, from phys.org, ethical framework aims to counter risks of geoengineering research. The report says, as interest grows in geoengineering as a strategy for tackling global warming, again, working out great after 75 years, right? The world's largest association of Earth and space scientists has launched an ethical framework as a guide to responsible decision-making and inclusive dialogue. The report, facilitated by the American Geophysical Union, that's the AGU, and advised by a global panel of experts, says any research into large-scale interventions in Earth's climate system must be grounded in sound ethical principles so society can make informed choices about whether to deploy them. It warns that the unintended consequences of large-scale deployment are largely unknown. Another lie. This time from the AGU. The consequences of global climate engineering operations are absolutely undeniable and getting worse by the day. So many in the ranks of so-called academia have completely betrayed the human race in the entire web of life. The same is true for matrix media minions. When populations are finally awakened to what's happening above their heads, to the global experiment which they have been committed to without their knowledge or consent, an experiment from which there is no return, will the proverbial pitchforks and torches moment occur? You decide. There's more. From the World Economic Forum, geoengineering, building ethics, transparency, and inclusion into climate intervention research. Ethics, transparency, and inclusion? Right, because we can trust the WEF. What a colossal lie. The WEF report continues. The urgency of the climate crisis has boosted interest in climate intervention or geoengineering, large-scale interventions to counteract global warming. They say more inclusive and evidence-based research will lead to a better informed decision-making scenario on the options for addressing climate change. They then say this: a new set of guidelines aims to ensure that all voices are heard and that risks and benefits are evaluated before climate research decisions are made. What a pack of lies, but they continue. They cite responsible research to be done, inclusive public participation, transparency, and then they say this: as geoengineering research and technologies evolve, so will this guidance. Users will revise, refine, and expand on these principles as needed, just as the AGU has done throughout the framework and development. As the risks and opportunities of climate intervention are evaluated, all voices need and deserve to be heard. This is particularly important, they say, for technologies that have the potential to adversely impact landscapes and people, or those that carry significant geopolitical risks, sometimes far from the location of the original intervention. In the future, they say, more systematic, transparent, and accountability governance frameworks will be needed to ensure safety and justice across geographies and throughout time. No words for the level of total complete fantasy this is. Throughout time, on the current course, nobody's going to be here for much longer, in great part due to climate intervention operations for the last 75 years. No one that's even slightly awake could possibly believe or buy into the "trust us, we're here to help" monumental lie. Time to wake up. There's absolutely nothing benevolent about climate engineering anything. It's about power and control. Yes, they have plans for us, and be assured you won't like where those plans lead. Nearly the whole of academia, in one form or another, are playing the part of matrix servants. The same is absolutely true of corporate media. From controller-manipulated conflict zones to climate engineering operations, the exact same predator-parasite class is in control. And this message to Americans: if you think that these controllers care any more about you than they do about those in conflict and climate catastrophe zones, think again. Populations, especially the kind that are armed, are a rapidly increasing liability to those in power. Remember that. From the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, fact check, they say, debunking weather modification claims. Listen to this. First, no one creates or steers hurricanes. That technology does not exist, they say. Then they continue, no technology exists that can create, destroy, or modify, strengthen, or steer hurricanes in any way, shape, or form. The next fact they cite, solar geoengineering, a theoretical practice which would modify the atmosphere to shade Earth. No facts here at all. Just believe it because we say it. How about let's go all the way back to 1947 when the U.S. military's first attempt to modify a hurricane was initially reported as being extremely successful by only dumping 80 pounds of dry ice into the storm at the right location. Small input, massive output. Changed that storm's direction by 130 degrees. There were lawsuits threatened, and then they walked it all back. Oh, our mistake. We didn't really do anything. This is business as usual. And those at NOAA with the illegal federal gag order on them, do we think they're going to tell the truth? And those that do decide to push these lies to protect their paychecks and pensions, those are exactly the kind of matrix servants I just mentioned. What will happen? How will the public feel about them when finally awakened to the degree to which people like this have deceived them? What will take place then? Moving on, I'm going to try to rip through as many headlines as I can before I run out of time. From the UK Guardian, humanity is on the verge of shattering Earth's natural limits, say experts in biodiversity. Experts warn that ecosystems are starting to approach tipping points. No, already past those points. The biodiversity crisis is not just about other species. Humans also rely on the natural world for food, clean water, and air to breathe. That shouldn't be hard for everyone to realize if they stop and think. Environmental breakdown is driving inequality, conflict, and injustice. We will see increased conflict for access to dwindling resources, particularly water and food. We will see increases in major health issues, particularly due to urban heat, as temperatures increase to intolerable levels, and pollution rises. It is rising. Look up. Can't even see across valleys anymore because there's so much filth in the air. And yes, there's pollution. I recognize that. But let's all pretend the climate engineering jets aren't spewing their filth into the sky as well. Mad Max on steroids is coming beyond what almost any can imagine. I do this research every day and have for over 20 years, and it is difficult for me to comprehend the totality of what's about to occur. From academic.oup.com Bioscience section, the 2024 State of the Climate Report, Perilous Times on Planet Earth. The report says, we're on the brink of an irreversible climate disaster. No, we're past the point of no return. This is a global emergency beyond any doubt. Much of the very fabric of life on Earth is imperiled. We are stepping into a critical and unprecedented new phase of the climate crisis. They continue, we find ourselves amid an abrupt climate upheaval, a dire situation never before encountered in the annals of human existence. They continue, we have now brought the planet into climatic conditions never witnessed by us or our prehistoric relatives. But then they give us the cure. Here it is. Solar radiation management research, also known as geoengineering, involves potentially risky techniques to reflect sunlight away from Earth to mitigate climate change. SRM is also controversial because of potential unintended consequences and ethical concerns. What could go wrong, or what could be unethical about filling the sky with toxic, ozone-destroying, rain cycle disrupting, planetary polluting particles? What could go wrong? From ScienceAlert.com, humanity faces a brutal future as scientists warn of 2.7 degree warming. That's 2.7 C. Way late on that. We're past 3.5 C since the true pre-industrial temperatures now. right now through the guardrail. From MSN, scientists share terrifying study into how the world will end. This is really comical. They say in about 1 billion years we could be in trouble. I mean, this is climate scientists. These people should be in a kindergarten. No insult to the kindergartners. From earthsky.org, massive methane gas stores could sit beneath Antarctica. This is truly bad news because there's enough methane in the Arctic to turn this planet into a true sister to Venus. And if there's 10 times more in Antarctica, we are truly in a dark corner. Climate engineering making it worse, not better. From ScienceDaily.com, catastrophically warm predictions are more plausible than we thought. Oh, gee, we didn't know. I knew at geoengineeringwatch.org. I said it for 15 years, 10 on this broadcast. It's not as bad as we're being told. It's way worse than we're being told. And climate engineering is further fueling that process, pushing us from the firing pan into the fire. And now the climate science community is starting to admit to it because they can't hide it anymore. From RTE News, Irish sea temperatures have risen more than previously estimated. There it is again. Over and over and over. We now hear from the so-called science community it's way worse than we predicted. And still total denial of the climate engineering elephant in the sky. From available data, I knew it was far worse than we were being told, and I've said so for 15 plus years. How could they not have known? In the ranks of the orchestrated political circus of insanity, we still hear, quote, "It's the economy, stupid." With that in mind, this new headline from resilience.com, "The environment is the economy, stupid." No functional planet, no people, simple. What are the statistical odds of current Earth changes not being anthropogenic or human-caused? 0. Yes, statisticians have done the calculations. If you don't know what the principle of Occam's razor is, please look it up. There's absolutely nothing natural about the current catastrophic Earth changes. Again, there can be no legitimate discussion of climate anything from any perspective without first and foremost acknowledging and addressing the climate engineering weather warfare issue. And no, it isn't just jet exhaust. Up-close film footage of retrofit nozzles on wing pylons being turned on and off proves this beyond any reasonable doubt. Let's consider this timeless quote from those that would call this conspiracy theory. This is from J. Edgar Hoover. "The individual comes face to face with a conspiracy so monstrous he cannot believe it exists. The American mind has not come to a realization of the evil which has been introduced into our midst. It rejects even the assumption that human creatures could espouse a philosophy which must ultimately destroy all that is good and decent." Now let's add this quote from Morpheus in the movie The Matrix. The Matrix is everywhere. It's all around us, even now in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. He then says this, "What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You've felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad." Some years ago on this broadcast, I shared what was my first strongly imprinted memory. Forgive me for doing so again. I was 4 years old in a restaurant with my parents. A young man who worked there was clearing up tables and dirty dishes, and he seemed to me like an adult child. He was a mentally challenged individual, I later understood. He slipped and dropped a large tray of dirty dishes. All the adults in the surrounding tables immediately howled with laughter. And I remember looking into this man's eyes, and I felt his pain. I felt his humiliation. But the laughter continued. And I remember being very alarmed at the behavior of the adults around me. I didn't understand. I couldn't understand their cruelty. And to this day, I still don't understand the cruelty and apathy of so many in the world that are all too willing and comfortable to actively or passively participate in the collective insanity, or to look the other way in regard to the rapidly escalating atrocities taking place around the world. Silence is betrayal, in the words of Martin Luther King. I can't look the other way. I won't. I pinned the following thoughts in a journal upon awakening on the morning of 9/11/2001, before having any knowledge of the events that were taking place that day on the other side of the country. And this is what I wrote. "I woke from dreams that haunt me, that haunt my mood. I feel an ever-increasing sense of mission that is slowly superseding all else. I do not know my role. I only know I want to play my part well, as Stoic philosopher Epictetus would say. I want only to embrace my appointed post and not to let it slip from my grasp. I periodically recorded my thoughts in this journal, at times over the coming years, but eventually the ongoing battle to fully expose the climate engineering, aka weather warfare operations, consumed all of my days and most all of my nights. I've never looked back, and I never will, unless or until the insanity in our skies is fully exposed and halted. Each of us, all of us, are needed and necessary in this must-win battle for all that we hold dear, for all that matters. Each of us and all of us are essential spokes in the wheel. True solace can only exist in looking through a clear lens and facing the gathering storm head-on. We can accept what is unfolding well or poorly, but accept that we must. Deciding to do all you can to make a difference for the better, given your individual circumstances, is a decision. It's the right decision. Remember and consider that every single individual that our collective efforts helps to awaken matters in ways that we can't yet fully know or comprehend, but it matters. The proverbial journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and beginning is half done. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific instructions on how you can help to move this fight forward. It's now or never. Please make your voice heard. Make every day count. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.